Advocate Lipedi.
It looks like Advocate Lepeli may have dropped off.
I'll continue from there.
Okay.
In the absence of Advocate Lepedi, I would like to go on to say that in recognizing these systemic injustices that marginalized communities affected directly by this Lesotho Highlands Water Project, the government of Lesotho has allocated a budget to review the treaty, providing a crucial opportunity to introduce gender-irresponsive policies that address intersectional discrimination. The review process, we believe, must prioritize climate resilience, fair resource distribution, the protection of women against gender-based violence, ensuring that treaty reforms promote economic empowerment, equitable land rights, and safeguards against environmental displacement. This webinar aims to facilitate a multi-stakeholder dialogue, bringing together policymakers, legal experts, environmentalists, and civil society organizations to explore inclusive reform that recognize the unique vulnerabilities of women in relation to the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. Our objective is to examine key reforms in the treaty, including financial benefits for Lesotho, improved water security, environmental sustainability, and community development. Among the key issues for review, if I may zoom into specific aspects of these issues. One, on the economic justice. The treaty does not ensure adequate financial returns for Lesotho, disproportionately impacting women, especially those in rural communities who rely on natural resources for their livelihoods. The renegotiation must introduce gender-responsive compensation structures, ensuring that financial benefits empower women through access to land ownership, entrepreneurial opportunities, and community development programs. For those of you who have closer relations with people who are accepting or receiving compensation, you know and you remember the problems that women in these communities are faced with, where men squander the compensation while women are left with nothing. Secondly, another issue of concern that we want to look at is community development and gender equity. Gender equity. When you look at Article 7(8) of this treaty, you will see that it lacks provisions for the empowerment of communities directly affected by the project. This exacerbates gender inequality. The treaty must integrate gender-sensitive development policies, including vocational training for women, legal protections against land dispossession, and local leadership opportunities. This ensures that women have a voice in governance structures and decision-making processes, reducing their vulnerability to systemic discrimination. Those are issues that we see need to be included in the treaty when we relook at it, as we have been granted an opportunity now. Comrades, we have to also look at how can we have community-led development and livelihoods restoration for those affected directly by this mammoth multi-stakeholder project. We know that the project does not only attract the Lesotho and South African governments. We have funders who bring money. We have companies coming to Lesotho. But communities that are directly affected are suffering. So the treaty, when you look at it, does not establish frameworks that position affected communities to the central shaping of development and restoration efforts. There are no mechanisms for meaningful community participation in decisions related to project planning, development priorities, or the restoration of livelihoods disrupted by displacement and environmental degradation. This has led to ineffective development outcomes and the erosion of livelihoods. The renegotiation must adopt a community-led development approach that empowers those directly impacted to lead in the design, implementation, and monitoring of restoration initiatives. Co-created livelihoods programs, equitable benefit sharing models, and participatory governance structures are essential to ensure sustainability and inclusion. That is, embedding transparency, accountability, and gender equity will strengthen resilience and promote genuine community ownership. Another big problem, another issue of review that we must look at closely is water scarcity. Despite being the source of water for South Africa or the big cities in Gauteng, Lesotho, and most importantly, communities affected by the Lesotho Highlands Water Project struggles with water shortages, disproportionately affecting women who are often responsible for securing water for their households. The treaty, the revised treaty, must prioritize water access for Lesotho's communities, ensuring that women and girls are not forced to travel long distances for water, exposing them to heightened risk of GBV in unsafe environments. Bomme le bontate le ha matamo a maholo a na le teng, bomme le banana, basadi ka hare ho naha ya Lesotho dithabeng kwana ba tsamaya nako e telele ho kga metsi tsatsi le leng le le leng. Ha bana metsi empa ba phela moo ho kotulwang metsi ke dinaha tsena tse pedi. Environmental and social protection is another key issue. We believe that the environmental degradation caused by the project directly impacts women in affected communities, leading to food insecurity and displacement. So there's a need for stronger social welfare measures that must be introduced to address the unique vulnerabilities of women in climate-stressed regions, ensuring livelihood restoration, sustainable agricultural practices, and protective policies against environmental displacement. Without going too far, let me conclude by saying that this webinar seeks to provide a platform for stakeholders to discuss and advocate for necessary amendments to the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Treaty. By addressing these key issues, Lesotho can ensure that the treaty aligns with national development priorities, safeguards its national resources, and promotes sustainable and inclusive growth. Furthermore, the active participation of affected communities is crucial in this dialogue. Their insights and experiences will help shape a more comprehensive and equitable agreement that not only addresses the shortcomings of the original treaty, but also empowers those directly impacted by the project. We understand that this is the beginning of conversations. This is the beginning of dialogue about this process of reviewing the treaty. And we believed that we need to give a start with minorities that are suffering, who continue to suffer, even at a time when we have phase 2 of the project underway. And we believe that we'll have multi-stakeholder conversations or dialogues or conferences going forward that would have more participants joining in person and possibly in Maseru, but this is a start. And we take this webinar as the first steps towards ensuring that women and those minority in the communities affected have a voice. I would like to say that we should move on to having our conversations from our experts, hear from them. Remember, you are allowed to pose your questions You can raise a hand if there's a pressing issue. Before I do so, in the interest of also giving a chance to those who need a Sesotho translation, bomme le bontate, re nka monyetla ona o re o bonang o kapela matsoho a rona, o kapela mahlo a rona wa hore mmuso wa Lesotho o entse boitlamo ba hore jwale ho kena kgabong ya ho thakgola ya hore re sebetsane le ho hlopha botjha selekane sena se pakeng tsa Lesotho le Afrika Borwa morerong wa metsi a dihlaba. Mme re re ke nako ya hore re ke re thakelane ka malebela, re kgothe seotlo, mme re bue ka ditaba tse amang bo melo mesehlanyana banna le basadi ba Basotho, haholoholo basadi le banana bao e leng bona ba qetellang re bona treaty ena kapa sona selekane sena se sa ba kenyeletse kapa se etsa dintho tse ba behang tsietsing le tlokotsing, mme maphelo a bona a ba tsietsing. Ba qetella ba iphumana ba wela molekong wa hore ke ba hlekefetsuwa kgafetsa le kgafetsa, ba sena bo moo ba nkang teng, ba sena moo ba sireletswang teng. Ha matshediso a fanwa, ba iphumana matshediso ano a inkelwa ke banna, ho sena moo basadi ba kenellang teng. Basadi ba lla ka hore banna ba ja matshediso a fanwang, empa re a tseba hore bophelong ho na le karolo e bapalwang e kgolo ke basadi tabeng ya bophelo, mme re bona selekane sena sa Lesotho le Afrika Borwa metsing a dihlaba se ba siya ka thoko, se etsa hore ba qetelle e le bahlekefetsuwa. Basadi kajeno lena ba ntse ba tsamaya nako e telele le banana ho kga metsi hore bophelo ba letsatsi le letsatsi bo be teng, mme re nka hore ke ntho tsa bohlokwa hore re shebe le tsona hore na basadi na ba keneletse, na ba na le toka eo ba e abelwang ke selekane sena, na basadi ho kenyeletse taba ya hore na re ba tshehetsa jwang hore ba be le ntlafalo bophelong. Ke nka hore ditsebi tsa rona ke tsona tse tla nama haholo ka ditaba tsena, ke ba fe monyetla, mme ke kopa hore re tle re qale ka ditaba tse amanang le community development and gender equity. Ke lebeletse hore re qale ka our independent gender and social inclusion expert, Dr. Mamweketsi Ntho. Ntho, Doctor, ke kopa o fa sebaka sena hore o kene kgabong.
Good morning and thank you, Ntate Ndaude. Okay. I am Mamweketsi Ntho. I am a retired gender and development studies lecturer, and I am currently now an independent gender and social inclusion expert or consultant. I am based in Kuting. I would like to welcome everyone who is participating in this meeting and feel very much honored to be presenting my views on this important issue. I would like to mention that the Inudi Legal Center gave me an opportunity to understand better about the Lesotho Highlands Water project by engaging me as their a gender impact assessment consultant in 2023, whereby I was assigned to look at how the advanced infrastructure work at Budihadi were impacting on gender relations. And I think that is the main reason I have been asked to come and present here about my thoughts on what you could propose for the review or the review of the treaty. Now, as we all know, and as Ndaude correctly mentioned, there's been a call for the review of the treaty, basically to renegotiate certain provisions that would benefit Basotho. And in most cases, the debate has been about royalties. And well, to some extent, the issue of environmental protection. But less has been said about issues of gender and social inclusion. Yet, if we're talking about a just and equitable treaty, it can be just and equitable if gender considerations are not made. Hence, this webinar is so critical for us to include the voices of those marginalized. The CNUD Gender Impact Assessment Study found two key issues. One, the intended outcomes of this water project is being experienced differently by men and women, as Ndaude has also mentioned. But there were also unintended impacts, which seem to be more adverse on women. And this, I think, led to CNUD going deeper into coming up with this dialogue so that the new treaty or the revised treaty will be able to address those unintended impacts, which we are saying they are impacting women adversely as compared to other groups. So I have few slides. I may not go through each of them, but I'm not going to talk about the overview of the treaty because that has been communicated well by Ndaude, but I'm going to look at how social inclusion and gender, how would the treaty look like if these considerations are made, and then look at the challenges which Ndaude also mentioned, and I'm not going to go deeper into that because he has already highlighted a number of those. Then I'm going to make the case and justification of why gender and social inclusion matter in this large-scale water project, and briefly look at enablers for gender equity. In other words, what can be done to ensure gender equity. And then I'm going to give my conclusions and recommendations and maybe lessons learned or just takeaways. Second slide, please. Okay. The section we're interested in is Article 7 and 18. Which reads, Lesotho Highlands Development Authority shall effect all measures to ensure that members of local communities in the Kingdom of Lesotho who will be affected by the flooding, construction works, or other similar project-related causes will be enabled to maintain a standard of living not inferior to that obtaining at the time of the first disturbance. I have actually emphasized that part. It will be enabled to maintain a standard of living not inferior. So, in other words, we are not here talking about a better standard of living, but something not inferior. Now, let's go to the next. I just wanted to put this for everybody to see what we are addressing here. Now, what would be a community development initiative that has gender and social inclusion considerations? One is the issue of livelihoods. This was alluded earlier that we need, we would see a project that is aiming at restoring livelihoods by ensuring that people affected by the project regain economic advancement. Secondly, you'd expect to see a project that enables access to resources, number of resources such as water and land resources, the biodiversity resources. That is what you would expect. Also, you would expect a project that has strong gender responsive and social inclusion policies and legal frameworks, so that gender equality is attained, or you are not seeing a situation where gender inequalities are exacerbated or gender stereotypes are maintained. Next, please. But as alluded earlier, what has been the experience of these communities? One, we have seen the displacement of communities with resultant loss of land resources. And we have seen also economic exclusion of certain groups in this area, in particular women, youth, also people with disabilities. There have not been any attempts to have their economic performance improved. But also more concerning is the increase in social ills, i.e. gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, a number of related health risks that came with the mobile labor. Next. Now, why is it important to talk about gender and social inclusion in the revised treaty? It is because the issue of gender equality, despite having been on the development agenda for decades, we still see inequalities across the world, not only in the third world, but across the world. This is despite the fact that laws and policies have been put in place, but unfortunately, sectors like water, mining, infrastructure-related sectors, energy, we have seen that they've been very resilient to accommodating gender initiatives. So it is very important, therefore, that as we speak about revising or reviewing our treaty, we should realize that there is need to always flag the issues of gender. So it has been argued that the reason that women remain underrepresented in leadership, in this technical fields, is because of the lack of political will. And this political will, we can see it from, or we note it with relation to lack of funding on gender-specific programs or interventions, and tokenism that goes together with the issues around gender. And more serious is the absence of data, gender-specific data, that can be used to monitor and trace the progress on gender initiatives or social inclusion. Next, please. Now, when when we look at different case studies across the world on large development projects, including water projects, we realize that enablers of gender equity would include commitment from governments, from institutions on gender equality, because gender equality is an enabler of development, and in particular, sustainable development. Also, the successes have been noticed whereby there are gender-responsive policies and legal frameworks. Also, active participatory mechanisms that include strong civil society voice that will speak on behalf of those who don't have the voice, and also robust monitoring systems. So now, what do we therefore suggest for the reforms? Next slide. I'm sorry, this is too small, but I will just summarize. I propose that I'll be very clear if this can be enlarged, but well, in short, what I'm proposing here is that there's need for an intentional, thank you. There's need for an intentional, review, whereby we really have the intention to see change in the lives of women and youth in this country. I've included youth in the matrix because youth have been left out for a long time, yet we are saying we have, as a country, we have a youth bulge which might explode anytime. So for us to maintain that bulge, we need to ensure that we include youth in our discussion. So one, I propose that the review should actually intentionally include gender reforms. These gender reforms will include provisions in the treaty, gender-specific provisions in the treaty to inform the renewed treaty in addressing gender disparities in the water governance and in the whole project activities. And also, I suggest that a gender strategy be developed that would include, among other things, introduction of the quota system that would lead to creating certain percentages, provisions whereby we're saying certain number of positions should be occupied by women, this percentage be occupied by youth, but not only in employment opportunities, but in issues like in business, the type of enterprises that you are going to fund. Be intentional on how you want women to benefit, how youth should benefit. And we can achieve this if we allow women and youth to participate in the discussions around the renewal of the treaty, but also try to create advisory councils made of women and youth so that they can advise going forward on what can be done. Also, I suggest that during these gender reforms that will form the treaty review, let's make sure that we collect sex disaggregated data And that will inform robust discussions, and that will bring realities to the surface of how women and youth can benefit, and also how we can address any negative impacts on their lives, especially those around the project site. I hope also that the authority should intentionally allocate a budget for the gender specific and gender responsive initiatives. And next slide, I think I'm coming to a close now. Here I've just highlighted a few takeaways from what we can think of as we go forward with the discussions. First of all, let's all agree and appreciate that it is important to understand gender and social inclusion discourses and dynamics. Also, let's agree that it is important to promote equitable participation decision-making around the renewed treaty and the project, and ensure participation of women. Let's enhance the women's voice in the discussions, and then think of how we can provide targeted support for marginalized groups, such as people with disabilities and the rural poor. Finally, my last slide, I think. Next slide, yes, another one. Okay. So what would be the way forward, and what are my lasting conclusions, is that women and youth in the treaty negotiations should not be it should not be something that we're saying it can be done or not done. Let's make sure that it happens, so that we can contribute to a better deal for Lesotho. And let's make sure that the project outcomes can be achieved through engagement and support of all marginalized groups. Let us ensure that we have oversight bodies that are gender responsive, so that they will monitor the implementation of the treaty. And let us offer education to our communities on gender and the importance of gender equality, so that equitable access to the benefits accruing from the project are shared by all around the project and across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We would like to hear whether are there any comments from the floor. Our esteemed attendees, this is a moment where you can make your own contributions. You've heard what our expert has had to say following the research she conducted working with Sinudi, and it is important to hear how you view her findings and what you can add to her key takeaways and the recommendations she's putting forward as key issues to consider for the review when it takes place. I'm opening the floor for questions. Anyone?
Can you hear me? My name is Hopewell Khadebe.
Oh, yes, you can go ahead, Khadebe. And then from there, I will take the next hands. Please don't take down your hands so that I can remember those who have raised their hands. Over to you,
Thank you,
Sipo.
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think it would have been very wrong for both countries to not look at how they dealt with the first phase and look at the lessons learned. And I appreciate the speaker for bringing forth suggestions of how the next contract going forward should seek to address the wrongs of the past. As a journalist, the previous stories were written about how the communities were affected. But I just want to find out as a question now, are communities, before this second phase starts, consulted sufficiently? And what can be done to make sure that there is compensation, maybe not just financially, but also in other ways that benefits them, considering that they many in the previous or in the first phase, they seem to have just been removed and ordered and told that this is for the good of the nation. And there seems to be like the benefits were not necessarily directed at those affected immediately. Thank you.
Lerato Mateka.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, ma'am.
Thank you. With the treaty implementation being done by an organization called the LHWP, my question is very interested in wanting to find out what would be the desired role for the LHWP to address the issue of women and children compensation and its benefits. Because as you gave the introduction, it kind of stems to the notion of culture, where culturally, Black women do not have access, and men are seen as breadwinners or decision makers. In this case, where we're talking about gender balance, when we have presentation, we spoke of educating the community. Are our communities educated enough to understand that while there's issues of compensation, women too should have a voice, women too should have should be included in fact. So in a case where we are talking about gender inclusion in this issue, where do you draw the line between the culture and norm?
Paul Manisa. Mr. Manisa.
Doubt. Kahola, my question to me is the issue of gender and the impacts of the project on people at a community level not lost in the power bureaucracy between the two countries in negotiations? Because you'd find that in some researches, there is a system of power asymmetry between the two nations. And when it comes to negotiating treaties such as this one, the main focus is only at a national level and not at a societal level. So is the impact of these people down there and the gender issues there neglected because there's that bureaucracy happening between the two countries?
Thank you very much, Mr. Manisa. Me Shweshi Mofuking.
Thank you very much, Ndate, and thank you for the wonderful work that you are doing. With the presentation that Dr. Nto has made, I feel that it is covering more on the gender issue and not so much on the social inclusion, especially when it comes to children. Even on one of her recommendations, she's talking about women and youth. As an advocate for children, I would like to know at what extent are children going to be engaged? I'm the director of NEGDO, and we are working throughout the country, and we know the situation of the communities where she did her research. The communities there, they have high stunting rates, which we generally have in Lesotho, but in the mountain districts, the rates are very high there. We also have low enrollment in pre-primary education, primary, and we also have high dropout rates in secondary education. So just focusing on the youth and women, like the older people, is living out the foundation of the country, which we feel that it is about time we change the narrative and invest in the new generation. So I would like to know how they are going to engage children, because we also believe that children can and are able to express how they feel and how they would like to also benefit. Thank you very much.
How will we consult children? Mr. Ntikwe Dikiki, if I'm correct, please have the stage.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Thank you. I think my question is a bit similar to that of Me Shweshwe here. Normally, when you talk about Tabatsa agenda, we often touch on also the marginalized communities, such as the Pride community, the LGBTQ. So I did not, if I've been following well, I did not hear Dr. Nto addressing perhaps the inclusion of that minority, which we have as a minority in our country, a marginalized minority. So is it perhaps, was she dictated by her scope that she did not touch on the LGBTQ community, or maybe it is just one of those perhaps untouched areas we often not want to perhaps want to address, or maybe perhaps as a result of not so much voices in the area advocating for them, it is easy to forget, or it is easy not to really pay attention to them. So when you talk about these policy reviews, do we, that which of course are about gender, do we leave them behind like that, or perhaps it will require a specific class of discussions? I think that is my question. Thank you.
Taking that we have limited time, your questions are noted. I've noted them, and Dr. Nto has noted them. I would like us to be kind enough to allow more presentations. I believe some of the questions will be answered in this upcoming presentations, and then we'll revisit the questions at the end. I hope that does not disenfranchise anyone. Salk, Emma, and Velo, who's going to be taking the stage to give us the next presentation? We are going to have a conversation about community-led development and livelihoods restoration. There have been some questions about how do we bring community-led development and the restoration of these communities.
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I will be representing SALC. My name is Emanuela Sakala, and I'm a legal researcher here at the Southern Africa Litigation Center, and we're delighted to be hosting this webinar today. I can see already there's lots of engagement and lots of interest in the topic. I'll go right into speaking about the engagement or involvement or livelihood standards of the communities involved. Allow me to switch off my video just to manage my bandwidth. So just to start off, I'd like just to note that when two countries come together to form a partnership and they come to the table to ink a treaty like the one being discussed today, I think that the expectation from people, and already from the submissions and the questions that have come forward, the expectation is that the two parties coming together are going to produce a fair partnership, one that just doesn't benefit one party over the other or the people from one country over the other, but uplifts the people from both countries, and especially the people who are most affected by the implementation of the project. And so we hope that going forward, this is what this treaty will reflect. A treaty which reflects a fair partnership, a treaty which reflects and achieves all the goals that would be expected from a large development project such as this one. Another important context to keep in mind as we look at this treaty, as this treaty is being reviewed, is the fact that it was signed during a time of great inequality. So you have on the one hand an apartheid South Africa, and you have on the other hand a Lesotho, which is a post-colonial Lesotho, so a young Lesotho at that. And I think this is very, very evident in the fact that the people of Lesotho's rights were not adequately safeguarded. So this review process is a great opportunity to hopefully produce a genuine partnership between the two countries, a partnership that will satisfy the people of Lesotho and the people of South Africa as well. Because the situation currently is that the water is flowing downhill to South Africa, and yes, South Africa is paying for this water and is enjoying this water, but the people closest to this water, the people in Lesotho, are bearing a much higher price. They're bearing injustices that don't seem to be addressed time after time. You see a situation where many of these people, and the doc has already spoken to this, she's talked about economic advancement or ensuring that the standard of livelihoods is not inferior to what it was previously. But currently, we're seeing a situation where the livelihoods of the communities closest to the implementation of the project don't have access to health, they don't have access to clean water, they're not able to continue life as it was before, they're not able to fish, they're not able to collect firewood. And they've also lost other intangible things such as social structures and cultural structures, things that they enjoyed previously, and yet you don't see that same development trickle down to them. You don't see them have access to clean water, and that's just, it's an irony that I think cannot be continued, an irony that should be addressed with the highest possible seriousness. So what then must change in this situation? What should we see change? What do we want to see happen in this situation? I think an important thing that needs to happen is that this treaty needs to not just be a transaction where Lesotho is getting money for the water that is providing, but that it should truly reflect a moment of transformation. It should be a project that should bring real transformation to the people of Lesotho, especially the communities most affected, the communities that have sacrificed a lot. They've been displaced. They've not received compensation or received inadequate compensation. And so they, more than anyone, deserve to see their lives transformed by this review process. And so that's why this conversation today is very, very important, especially because things like compensation, standards of livelihoods, and access to information, important components around the environment and social justice were not properly considered in 1986 when this treaty was being negotiated. So now is the time to ensure that these aspects are incorporated in this review process. Also, another important thing is that for as long as communities are not seen as equal partners or as contributors to this review process, their livelihoods will continue to deteriorate. They must be a part of this conversation, and any conversations around restoration of livelihoods, any conversations around how this natural resource, the water governance of the dam, the water governance aspects of the project, they have to be in the rooms. Communities have to be in these rooms. These are standards that are required not only domestically, and they should be in the domestic law. The domestic laws should reflect this, the Water Acts, the Environmental Acts, and even when we talk about the development, the order, the LHDA order, it should also reflect this community-led and community-informed drive to the renegotiation or the review of the treaty. So these standards really, as I said, are international standards. They're well-recognized, well-established standards that water governance cannot happen in the absence of people. How else will compensation be determined if the people are not there to say, this is what my livelihood was, this is what it needs to be? If they're not in those rooms, then this water resource will never benefit them. This water resource or this treaty will never be of any use to them. And so compensation should only be determined with the incorporation of the views of the people that ought to be compensated. There also needs to be a lot of transparency incorporated and entrenched in the treaty. Transparency and accountability mechanisms that people can actually access. And an important thing is the access to the information. Note that Senoli and SAUC have collaborated, and there is a case currently in court in which the communities are asking for access to information on a livelihood baseline survey. Now, this survey is important because it will be the basis on which they can claim compensation or full and adequate compensation, or the extent to which their compensation should go. So the review process presents this opportunity to ensure that, communities don't have to go to court to assert their rights. The treaty should adequately protect their rights so that even if it comes down to them enforcing this right, it's a clearly articulated right in the treaty. What then should change? What should we see? What do we want to see going forward? I think it's important for lawmakers to ensure that they listen continuously to the views of the people, that they don't just go ahead and draft this treaty, which doesn't reflect or doesn't address these issues that have persisted for a long time. So the treaty should then incorporate consultation procedures. It should incorporate a transparent system around compensation, and it should really reflect even things that are intangible. It should compensate for intangibles that are not very apparent. And so the treaty should entrench proper compensation procedures. Another important thing that the treaty can incorporate at this stage or can consider that should be considered and does affect the livelihoods of people is the environmental impact. How is the treaty going to protect people's livelihoods as it is affected by the environment? So the treaty must provide long-term environmental protection provisions, and it must also take into consideration climate change. How are future communities going to live off of the water? What water is there? People are facing food insecurity, they're facing a risk of water scarcity already, and the population continues to grow. So it's very, very important that all these aspects are considered. Really, in closing, I think what's important to see is that the fundamental rights of the people of Lesotho continue to be protected. These are rights that are inalienable to them. They have a right to dignity, which also connects to them having an adequate standard of living and a right to property. Their property should not be, the enjoyment of that right should not be taken away without any compensation. So lawmakers have an opportunity to protect the rights of their people, and I hope that they take this opportunity and really listen and really just come up with a document that will make future generations in Lesotho proud, that they had a group of people that were truly concerned and drafted a document that that stands the test of time, and it really, really cannot continue to be business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emanuela. You remind us of very tough times in Lesotho. Not only was the treaty signed between apartheid South Africa, but also in Lesotho, it was a time of a military government. That is why you have the legal document establishing the body that oversees the project in Lesotho, established by the LHD order, is an order by the military government. So we really need to move on the account of time. A lot has been said about the need for transparency and accountability mechanisms that are accessible for the people as we come up with a new treaty. When we draw this new treaty, we should consider that community development is included. Their livelihood restoration is included. Emanuela reminds us that our people who have been displaced by the dams can no longer fish freely. We have seen stories coming up about how there's fights over fish in the Katse Dam. This stories also reminds us that there are huge problems and they must be addressed by this review. As those questions come in, please note them down. Allow us to have yet another presentation. We would like to have Ms. Advocate Mosalitie give us a presentation on gender equality and women empowerment issues. She is a women empowerment specialist. She gave me a note that I should clearly indicate she's more going to focus her presentation on water scarcity and the impact of Lesotho Highlands Water Project. There has been a question around whether the research made dealt with the problems faced by people who have to walk long distances to fetch water. I think she will also talk to that. No Bantu. She will definitely talk to the question you raised in the chat. Advocate Mosalitie. We have too little time, please.
Thank you so much, Ndadebili, and thank you so much, esteemed participants. As it has already been mentioned, I am Advocate Mosalitie from Sinudu Legal Center. I work as a program lawyer charged primarily with the mandate of community engagement and gender justice and women empowerment. This primarily warrants my constant engagement with communities that are affected by large development projects such as the LHWP. I am currently working very closely with communities affected by the ongoing phase 2 of the project, mainly to empower them with knowledge on their rights so that, in fact, to position them to be able to articulate, demand, and assert them where such rights are being violated. So my presentation today is largely inspired by the views of the communities based on our constant engagement. In order to manage my bandwidth, I will be switching off my video because I am, yes, currently in Mokhotlong and the network isn't really good. So as it has already been mentioned, my presentation will be on water scarcity and the impact of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Treaty, at least from the community perspective. So, from our previous speakers, we've learned that, at least from a development perspective, construction of large dams is seen as a catalyst for economic growth, with the expectation that benefits will eventually trickle down to foster broader economic development. I assume, or I'm confident, that this is precisely the vision behind this was precisely the vision behind the Kingdom of Lesotho's decision then to enter the LHWP Treaty in 1986. The idea was that exporting water and generating hydroelectric power would stimulate national revenue while creating jobs and enhancing infrastructure, and ultimately lifting the standards of living for its citizens. But as the previous speakers have already articulated, however, and unfortunately so, while the LHWP has contributed significantly to the spread of Lesotho's economic growth, if you look at it in terms of indicators such as the GDP, and also looking at the electricity generation, the expected development dividends, especially when you look in the context of locally affected communities, have not really materialized equitably. In fact, as it has already been mentioned, many communities, both under phase one and phase two, remain water insecure. And this illustrates the gap between economic growth at the national level and the development that is actually felt on the ground. So, the objective of my presentation will be one, to assess the treaty's impact on local water security. Two, it will examine how water scarcity has disproportionately affected women and girls, and also highlight some of the case studies to give you guys a feel or a flavor of the real situation on the ground. And also, lastly, it will propose what we believe, or what the communities believe, will be equitable revisions to the 1986 treaty, grounded mainly on community rights and gender justice. So, what we have gathered from the communities and what we have observed is that despite being the source of water for South Africa through the exportation of billions of cubic meters of water, many communities affected by both phases of the LHWP suffer from water scarcity. And while the impact is pronounced on all community members, women and girls, who are often responsible for securing water for their households, bear the largest brunt. And this has led to some concerns of the issue. And some of these issues have led to the concerns that whether the treaty adequately benefits Lesotho in terms of financial returns, maybe infrastructure development, and the general social welfare programs for the affected communities. So, what we learned from the communities is that, particularly communities that are currently affected by the phase two, which is where I had mentioned that I am currently working closely with such communities. I discovered in one community, the communities of Tloharebue, that while construction processes were underway, mainly the construction of roads, their taps got destroyed in the process, and community members from this village are currently experiencing water insecurity, mainly as a result of the fact that their water sources were destroyed in the making of this in the making of the or in the construction of the roads within their communities. We were also made alive to a similar situation in the community of Masako, where community members now have to rely on a single tap, and sometimes the water does not come out sufficiently, allowing everyone to benefit. So some of the treaty gaps that we have been able to identify is that there is no obligation to provide local water access. If you look at Article 4 of the treaty, you will see that it explicitly outlines the primary purposes of the project as the transfer of water to South Africa and the generation of hydroelectric power for Lesotho. However, the treaty is silent or does not pronounce itself on any obligation to ensure clean and accessible water for communities directly situated in or affected by the project infrastructure. We believe that this legal omission, it creates a structural vacuum that permits the LHD to prioritize infrastructure geared toward export and revenue generation while neglecting the critical water needs of host communities. With this said, we were currently made aware of a very recent situation in one of the communities, that is the Dube community, where we learned that allegedly 3 community members met their untimely demise following consumption of contaminated water. And this contaminated water comes from an unprotected well located near community defecating sites and adjacent to community cemeteries. So, having experienced heavy rainfalls since January, it is believed that runoff from the defecation sites and cemeteries contaminated the wells. And please note that I use the term allegedly because I have not yet been able to get hold of the doctor's postmortem report, if there's any, nor have I been able to reach the family's deceased members, nor speak with the doctor who was assist with these cases. But one thing for sure is that I have received the information from the community chief in that area, confirming that yes, indeed, 3 community members died following short illnesses after consuming water from the well. And this information is also making rounds in our mainstream media. It is alleged that apparently the water was tested and declared unclean for human consumption, and public gathering was also held to notify the community members of such incident. So this case is just to illustrate what the failure has resulted in. Had there been a clause in the treaty which now mandates community members to be granted access to water, or say that there should be developments geared towards ensuring that community members' social development is also improved, then this case could have been avoidable, or it could have been preventable. So such neglect also directly contradicts the principle that water is a fundamental human right. And by not integrating the local access into the project's legal and operational frameworks, the treaty effectively renders communities invisible in both planning and resource distribution. In fact, that's what the community members, that's how they feel. Also, to add on that, the community members believe that the treaty is entirely gender. In fact, this is what we also feel as the organization. The treaty is entirely gender neutral and fails to acknowledge the disproportionate impact of displacement, water scarcity, and economic dislocation on women and girls. It includes no provisions for gender analysis. I think this Mayor Dr. Anto had clearly articulated. It does not have any provision on for protective infrastructure such as lighting around water points or safe sanitation facilities. And because of this, like the crisis that I had mentioned, that particularly in the community of Masakong, where they had experienced this challenge with the contaminated water, now they had to look for alternative wells on which to draw their water for their daily consumption and all of that. This led to women working long hours, exposing them to risks such as gender-based violence. And in the case of young girls, they miss educational opportunities in the sense that now to go walk such long distances, they might in the process, or they have in the process, missed the opportunity to be in schools. So we believe that this oversight undermines key development outcomes, including the right to education, productivity, and while it perpetuates intergenerational cycles of marginalization. Gender injustice remains systematically unaddressed. Also, we feel that the treaty, Emmanuel, Emanuela had already mentioned that the treaty was entered into during the apartheid period in Southern Africa, while in Lesotho, it was entered into during the military rule. Now, we feel that the treaty embodies an outdated and largely neoliberal market-oriented approach. Its interest is mainly a business transaction in terms of which uh, Lesotho transports water or exports water to South Africa in return for royalties. So we feel that it, in a way, reflects the 1980s era priorities that only favored national revenue generation and elite driven growth over community welfare and inclusive planning. It does not necessarily align with contemporary human rights standards, which mandate that community members must be placed central to project designs, project development, and project implementation, while also ensuring sustainable or promoting sustainable development process. In our case, that is SGD 5 on gender equality and SGD 6 on safe water and sanitation. It also does not adhere to international environmental law standard. As a result, affected communities are treated as collateral damage rather than as legitimate stakeholders in the development process. So we feel that the treaty promotes
Nemusa,
sorry.
try to wrap up. We are a bit behind time.
Okay, thank you so much. So we feel that the treaty promotes an extractive model of development that exacerbates inequality within Lesotho rather than fostering equitable redistribution of development benefits. So what we suggest happens, or what we suggest is included in the reform, is that there should be direct water access to affected villages. And as my colleagues had already mentioned out, there should be gender responsive planning and budgeting to ensure that even women's voices are also included, that the treaty is reflective of their voices and of the entire community members, and not just designed purely for economic priorities with no human rights considerations in mind. As a last note, I'd like to say that water should not be a privilege for some while a burden for others. Lesotho's water belongs to its people first, and the new treaty, it is important that it must reflect this principle by ensuring that development is not unjust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Memusa. On the account of time, let me rush and ask Advocate Lebohang Ntlelampai to join us and talk about issues of environmental and social protection.
Thank you very much, Tate Billy, and a very good morning to our attendees. My names are Advocate Lebohang Ntlelampai, and I work for Federation of Women Lawyers, FEDA. And so my task today is to add to the discussion by discussing the environmental degradation caused by the project and its disproportionate impacts on women manifested through food insecurity, displacement, and the erosion of local livelihoods. Could I please have the host share my presentation on screen?
Share your presentation. Advocate,
On
please
screen.
remember you have 10 minutes.
Okay. Could I also seek leave to turn my camera off? I have a bit of flu, so I'd
Okay.
have to be wiping my nose on screen.
Go ahead.
So, Bomelon, that in the interest of time, I shall not get deeper into the introduction, but I would like to just highlight and just briefly let you know that my presentation today will basically zero in on the socio-environmental disruptions specifically affecting rural women. And so the rationale for this gendered approach stems from the observation that environmental changes and social disruptions affect women disproportionately. And so female-headed households, which are often already marginalized due to some other socio-economic constraints, face exacerbated challenges when natural resources are depleted, when infrastructure is compromised, or when environmental hazards increase due to project-induced changes. Thus, we feel it is important to understand the gender-specific impacts so that we can ensure that environmental management strategies and policies are both inclusive and effective. Next slide, please. Yes, so here, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is what I'd like to refer to as the general environmental impacts of the project, being land degradation, soil erosion, agricultural loss, reduction in soil fertility, intensified rainfall patterns, disruptions of ecosystems, deforestation, reduced biodiversity within project impacted communities, displacement of local flora and fauna that once thrived in those communities, and of course, the disappearance of wetlands. And so, as I did mention, these are basically the general environmental impacts of the LHWP. But now, looking specifically at the impacts of the project on female-headed households or women, as I did mention that my presentation will focus specifically on, I would like us, firstly, there are what I would like to refer to gender-specific consequences. There's been a couple of studies that have shown that the environmental degradation from the project disproportionately affects rural women. And so in many communities, we all know that women are primarily responsible for the subsistence of agriculture, for water collection, as it has already been said a couple of times, and of course, maintaining local food supplies. Now, with land loss and reduced soil fertility, women face dwindling agricultural yields, forcing them to work longer hours and to invest more labor without corresponding gains in productivity. And so now the contribution historically central to the community's livelihoods have been critically undermined by the consequences of environmental change. Also, there has been, I'm aware that you're not moving the slides, but I'm a bit ahead now. Also, there's been several NGOs highlighting that the economic impacts on women derive not only from land loss or loss of arable land, but also from the disrupted traditional livelihoods. There are quantitative surveys that highlight that some households within project affected areas indicate that women's income from agricultural activities has declined by about 35 to 50% since the initiation of phase 2 of the project activities. Additionally, there's also community data that shows that the average time that a woman spends on water collection and farming tasks has also increased by nearly 40%, therefore correlating with the deterioration of land quality and the longer distances they must travel to access clean water. During this time that they travel to gather resources and to collect water, heightened levels of GBV. And so beyond the direct economic indicators also, the degradation of natural resources has eroded social capital within these communities. Women traditionally play a stabilizing role in community life, and so the shrinkage of environmental resources not only undermines economic security, but also disrupts community cohesion. A lot of social networks have been weakened now as collective decisions regarding resource management become more contentious in times of scarcity. So the impact is further compounded by limited access to alternative income opportunities, often leaving women with fewer options to pivot away from declining agricultural revenue. The gendered impacts of environmental degradation not only affect immediate livelihoods, but also have long-term implications for community health and resilience. So moving on, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I would like to get into the mitigation measures and policy recommendations. So it is our belief that addressing this dual challenge of environmental degradation and gender disparities requires a multifaceted approach. Firstly, there should be robust environmental monitoring coupled with sustainable development practices that can restore degraded lands. Reforestation initiatives combined with soil conservation techniques, we believe could reverse the situation, because we've seen this across other regions, across the SADC region, especially in Zambezi, in Namibia, where revegetation efforts did reduce erosion. Now, from a policy perspective, we believe that integrating gender considerations into environmental management frameworks is very critical. This involves, of course, the active participation of affected women in decision-making forums related to water resource management and land rehabilitation strategies. Also, what could be important is the empowerment programs, which could include training in sustainable agricultural practices, the introduction of drought-resistant crops, and diversification of income sources to reduce dependency on agricultural yields. Next slide, please. Also, NGOs and governmental agencies could collaborate to develop gender-responsive policies that acknowledge and address the specific needs of rural women. And one potential strategy could, of course, be the establishment of community-based resources management committees with guaranteed female representation. What could also be of assistance could be provisions of microfinancing options tailored to women entrepreneurs, especially rural women, because by supporting them in establishing small-scale businesses, particularly those linked to sustainable agriculture and food processing, there's potential to mitigate the negative economic impacts resulting from environmental degradation. Also, there could be training programs that build capacity in irrigation management, in water conservation, and low-input farming methods, which could significantly alter the trajectory. Additionally, policymakers could also consider implementing compensation schemes and targeted subsidies for communities most affected by the project, because ensuring timely compensation for lost land and resources can ease the transition and support the development of alternative livelihoods. It is also vital to invest in research and development aimed at understanding the complex interrelationship between environmental degradation and gender inequality. Collaboration also amongst local universities, international organizations, and community-based research centers can lead to innovative solutions tailored to the unique conditions of the Lesotho Islands, because encouraging multidisciplinary approaches ensures that both scientific and social nuances of the problem are addressed cohesively. Now, wrapping up, ladies and gentlemen, we do acknowledge that since the inception of the project, it has been at the center of transformative development projects in the SADC region, and that it has generated notable economic benefits at both the national and regional level. However, its environmental degradation and disproportionate impacts on rural women have raised serious concerns amongst, obviously, as NGOs, which is why we're here today, and some other environmental advocacy groups. So what we're saying is that the long-term success of water infrastructure projects like this particular one depends not only on meeting the economic and technical benchmarks, but also on protecting the environment and ensuring that the benefits and burdens are shared equitably across all segments of society. And so the pathway or the path forward is as much about restoring ecosystems as it is about empowering those who depend on them, in this case, particularly rural women. Also, for us as NGOs, I think this is more of a case study which provides a valuable lesson that sustainable development must incorporate both ecological preservation and social equity. And so the challenge now lies in the mobilization with regard to us as NGOs, now lies in the mobilization of resources, of course, and political will to implement these measures, ensuring that both current and future generations can thrive in a balanced socio-environmental landscape. And that being said, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who may have missed some of the things I said, my apologies. I had to literally wrap through this presentation because we are pressed for time. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Rampai. We are indeed pressed for time. We have asked our panelists to also address some of the questions you posed earlier. We are trying to ensure that whatever you had presented as a question can be answered. I would like to also give an opportunity to Honorable Mokhotu Makhalanyane. He joined us earlier. And Honorable Member, I would like you to take an opportunity and talk about issues of economic justice. Is he still with us? Honorable Makhalanyane.
Hello, sir. I'm sorry.
You have the stage, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I should remind you that we have about 10 minutes for presentations.
Yes, I remember that.
Thank you, sir.
I remember that. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, Honorable, I can hear you perfectly.
Do I need to do any introductions? I will I'll
Please
be
do so.
okay. Kochuma Khalangen is my name, a member of parliament and the chair of chairs in the parliament of Lesotho. And I appreciate the moment. I've listened to the other speakers, especially Mayor Musa, Advocate Musa. So I'll get into this issue as to looking at where we are now and equity perspective. So the background for the Lesotho Highlands Water Project is well known between the government of Lesotho and the government of Republic of South Africa. And its purpose was to ensure the supply of water by Lesotho to South Africa from Orange River in return for royalties, which are used to construct dams that produce electricity. We know that. But I'm sorry that there's a bee that was attacking. But I have 5 points to present here in terms of the concerns that we have. So the embassy. So the first one is the economic disparity. So the treaty has been criticized for disproportionately benefiting South Africa while leaving Lesotho with minimal economic gains. Only recently, we realized that I don't know whether I'm still on. I feel like I'm switched off. I don't know. Okay.
You're still on, Honorable, but there is also
thank you so much.
so in the background. Please lessen the sounds in the background.
Okay, then. So I was on the issue of economic. I was on the issue of economic disparity. That recently, there was, especially the first quarter of the 2024, there was some increase in terms of that dividend that we received, the country receives from the South Africa. But over the years, this money has been very little for the country to make an impact. So that boost to the royalties was also as a result of some negotiations which came with the new government, which has helped so far. So I think we still have a problem in terms of really saying, in terms of equality around that issue, in terms of negotiating on a same platform. Number 2, the issue of inequalities, the poverty and livelihoods, the country. Our country is in trouble. When you look at the Article 7, the treaty states that the LHDA shall effect all measures to ensure that members of the local communities in the Kingdom of Lesotho who will be affected by flooding construction works or other similar project-related works will be enabled to maintain standard living not inferior to that obtained at the time of first disturbance, provided that such authority shall effect compensation for any loss to such member as a result of such project-related costs not adequately met by the measures, unquote. The question that is in my mind and that remains is this the case? Well, from observation and then interaction with the people from those areas who have a couple of times come to the parliament with petitions, that it's questionable, the adequacy of that. Number 3, cultural inequalities, and look at that in terms of this. Basotho were uprooted from their ancestral lands, which hold significant cultural and spiritual value. The loss of these lands has not only disrupted their way of life, but also alienated them from their cultural roots and practices. Further, the resettlement process disrupted traditional social structures and support networks. This has led to increased social stress and breakdown in community solidarity, making it difficult for displaced individuals to adapt to their new environment. So there's no value you can place in terms of the cultural beliefs, cultural establishments. You cannot place a value on that. Number four, the water shortages. It's a paradox in Lesotho that despite being a major water exporter, Lesotho suffers from chronic water shortages in many areas. Members of parliament, when they have been assisted to have some water, it's a celebration, it's a big issue, as if water is a scarce commodity. That's unfortunate. That's why I said this is a paradox, which highlights the failure of the treaty to ensure adequate water supply for Lesotho's own population. The recent construction of Mitulun Dam in Maseru could be cited as an alternative source of water. Unfortunately, the Mitulun Dam will not solve the long-term demand challenges in the lowlands. That demand remains. And number five issue is about the governance and accountability. There have been ongoing concerns about the governance and management of the project. Issues such as a lack of transparency, corruption, and inadequate compensation for affected communities have reportedly undermined trust in the authorities overseeing this project. The lack of transparency and effective management could lead to misallocation of resources and unfulfilled promises to the local population. This also has been revealed when the large population of or the communities who were displaced come regularly to the parliament with petitions. Another paradox is about the energy crisis. As we are aware that it was the issue of water and then electricity. The treaty promised improvements in Lesotho's energy supply through hydroelectric power generation. However, due to reduced water levels and other challenges, Lesotho continues to face energy shortages. You will realize that now the issue of solar has been taken so seriously, but looking at the major need, the high need or demand of electricity, what the country is doing on the energy in terms of solar, instead of capitalizing on hydropower or hydroelectricity, electric power generation, that issue of solar is having a serious repercussion in the long run because of the number or the amount of electricity megawatts that they produce beyond the sunlight time. So that's why I said even here is paradox that we are supposed to be having a lot of energy because of the water projects, but that's not the case. So it's the issue of the water, it's the issue of electricity, which are major deficits in terms of looking at the treaty itself. These points reflect the complex and often contentious nature of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Treaty, highlighting the need for a more balanced and equitable approach to resource management and international cooperation would do for the country. And I wish, even as we are looking at the review and renegotiating the agreement, all these points could be taken very seriously in order to balance things up for Basotho. When things like this, which are based on our mineral resources, are coming, we are expecting a better life for the people. We are expecting the better economy or improvement or a growth of our economy. But if you look at this, it has been more like a status quo for a longest time. The beneficiaries in the mountains, especially where around the dams, who are supposed to be benefiting, their lives being bettered off, you can see that it's either a status quo or their lives are not even improving. Whereas they go out to South Africa, to Zamazamas, they struggle. Whereas you'd think that when these projects of this magnitude are brought around those areas, it meant job creation for the people. It meant a better life, development around those areas, but that's not necessarily the case. I think maybe thus far I'll say I've said what is in my mind concerning the issues of the treaty and the agreement.
anything regarding, Honorable, anything regarding issues of economic justice? How should the review of the treaty look at issues of economic justice?
Yes, since 1986, we already have failed the people in terms of economic justice. Like I said, we were thinking this will make the lives of the people better off. But I'm telling you, there are very few people who can relate to the benefits of the water as an individual, especially the people who were affected around those areas. So the civil society, the community at large will have to stand up, and the government and the parliament will need to look at this. So in order to really get the points well around this issue, we really need to make sure that the academia, the researchers, the legal fraternity, they can help us as a parliament to get the right points. Are we really getting the benefit that we anticipated, or we are just participants in the issues or in the economy that was supposed to be?
A key question indeed.
Yes.
On the account of time, please allow
Yes.
me, Honorable, to thank you for your contribution. And
Yes.
I anticipate that there will be some questions from our attendees, and I would like to give Advocate Lepedi a chance to also say a few words. I took this spot in the morning. And thank you very much, Honorable.
Thank you so much.
And please mute your mic. Our fellow comrades, our esteemed participants, please bear with us. I would like to encourage you to write your questions in the Q&A, as we see that we have spent much time on the past presentations. I would like to also call on Advocate Lepedi to have his bite, but also to try to address some of the questions that have already come up. I know that he's not new to this. He should be well placed to respond to all the questions. Advocate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Billy. And may I humbly suggest that I come at the end during closing remarks, and then you continue as planned, please.
Okay. So at this juncture, I would like to remind us that there are a few questions that had already come up. I know that we took questions from Sipo, Lerato, Mpomanesa, if the surname is correct, Nzumkhehle, Dibusein, and others. So some of them have been answered, but I would like to open the space for more questions to be presented so that we can see how our panelists will take them. I've noted questions presented by people that I mentioned, and I'll try to remind our panelists what the questions were. Please don't take down the hands. I can see them. Comrade Dirateko, please take the stage. Moholo ke kopa nke monyetla ona. Kamra hao ho tlotleng Ntate Gerald Mokoni, I see him, and then Thato Munyake. Thank you.
Ntate Chairperson.
Yes, sir.
You hear me? Okay.
I can hear you clearly, sir. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ndate. I really appreciate for this important conversation. I have two questions to the member of parliament. We were pushing in a campaign regarding compensation issues, trying to engage stakeholders on what if we can have a national compensation policy that will cover all the development or capital development projects, to run away from having individual policy or individual compensation policy for each, either being the LHDA, either being the Minister of Mining, either being the Minister of Environment, or any developmental project, to have a consolidated policy that will engage or that will entail all issues that have to be considered when these kind of development projects are being introduced to the country. That's the first question. Okay, the question is based on whether the member of parliament, is it not appropriate to have either the Compensation Act or a policy that will include whatever I've already mentioned. Secondly, on the same, on our member of parliament, we thought it's also a high time that we have a certain a portion of the royalties, especially to people who have been affected by the development of projects, such as the people at Mokotlo or within the LHWP projects, where we can have either 10% of those royalties to go to the affected communities, so much that they know and they benefit out of such projects, because the communities did not decide to have such projects, and those projects have to benefit. Either if you are talking about women, you are talking about youth, you are talking about men, but such projects have to have, they have to leave something, so much that those people will appreciate the existence of such projects within their areas. Thank you, Ndate.
I'm not sure if Ndate Mokoni would like to take the stage or give. Okay, I think you should go ahead, Ndate Mokoni.
Thank you very much. And one must start with appreciating this webinar, very important. I would like to limit myself to issues relating to the coming review of the treaty and not allow myself to address other issues which may not be so directly linked to the review of the treaty. I would want to maybe pose a question to all the presenters as to what are you suggesting, what are you recommending to the government of Lesotho specifically in terms of the process that government must take towards reviewing the treaty. There are a lot of lessons learned. The important thing is, how are we going to ensure that all those lessons that we learned from the current treaty, from the implementation of phase 1 and part of phase 2, how do we ensure that all those now come into the port and government include those as they engage with the Republic of South Africa towards the review? I want to have my question as short as that, but at the same time, I think I should not leave the participants to believe that some of the information provided really today was correct. I need to provide some perspective to to some of the information. I work for the LHDA. I'm the manager at Budihadi branch, and information relating to water shortage, water scarcity around phase 2, it's really not so accurate. When this project first worked around the site establishment, which is Madingwane and Tuharibuwe Masakong, there was no water at all. The pumps had stopped working, and the project provided pumps to the project area communities. We provided tanked water, and we also provided, now as we speak, we have water at Masakong, 4 standpipes providing water. Madubadube is more than 8 kilometers away from the project area, and as we speak, LHDA has connected water, provided water to that community, clean running water to that community, and it would not be correct to portray a picture of LHDA or the LHWP, making people suffer in terms of water, particularly on the phase 2 part of the project. One would say or extend an invitation to the participants and the presenters to come to the project area, phase 2 specifically, for them to be provided with information, accurate documents, so that in the future presentations, we have information and we provide it as accurate as it should be. Lastly, Chair, not to waste your time, inclusivity or including other people in the work that we do. I would want to encourage everybody to be included when we conduct our research, when we do our surveys, because some of the information that has been provided, had it been that all stakeholders were included, involved, contacted, some of the information would have been clarified and not be presented the way it has been. Thank you.
So thank you, Ndadamukone. While there shall always be 2 sides to a coin, and of course, differing opinions and views on how issues are on the ground, allow me to give others a chance to also say something. That Monyake. Oh, please, Ndate Monyake, you had a question. While we wait for more questions, I would like and invite our panelists to address some of the issues arising. Honorable Makhalanyani, if you're still around, please, can you address some of the issues that Comrade Teko raised? Very interesting comments coming from him. Is it not time for the composition for a national compensation policy? And of course, is it not time for royalties or a share of the royalties to be distributed to the affected communities? Briefly, the question is, the civil society in Lesotho has been pushing for a campaign to have the country establish a national compensation policy so that all projects will be based, their compensation for communities will be based on this compensation policy. Secondly, is it not time for a share of the royalties received from the Lesotho Islands Water Project to a certain portion, a certain percentage to be directed to development projects in the communities affected directly?
Yes, no, I appreciate that. The Democon will remember that I've talked about perpetual beneficiation of the people who are affected by the project, and I think it's time, but I think in terms of participation, it has taken long for the larger communities to participate. So mic is muted. I can't see what's. Unmuted. Okay. I think I was muted by mistake. I was just saying that it's is the issue also of the policies, is the issue of the legislative. Okay, so I was saying, in terms of participation, you will realize that in the Parliament of Lesotho right now, on the 2nd of May, I managed to put a motion on the Public Participation Act, which must allow Basotho to participate in whatever affects them on a regular basis, on a daily basis, like the issue of water itself. I still think it needs a broader and a larger part of Basotho to participate. Said, how would we want it? Even in South Africa, said you are going to receive the water from Lesotho, but are you thinking about those people? If you go to Lesotho, you found one village without water. I know that I'm going to say maybe some of the things are not accurate, but if you were to talk about my area, especially my constituency in Mokgatwaneng, you'll find that there are places whereby people are going from one area with buckets to get the water. They are struggling with water. If you go to Tuate, those are the places I've been to recently. They are still not having water. They are still struggling with the issues of water. So that's a fact. So I think it is. I agree with. I don't know whether you said it's in that who was talking about that coming together of the people and support and making sure that this issue of water compensation can cover the larger part.
Thank you, Honorable. I would like to invite Advocate Lepedi to give us a wrap up. We are way above the time, but if among our panelists there are some who would like to take the stage and add more to their presentations and address questions, please do so before or as Advocate Lepedi prepares himself. Thank you, Honorable Makhalanyan.
Yes, I think it's important that LHDA or the authorities should not feel like they are being attacked with this discussion. This is a national issue. Does not only depend on what they do, what they are not doing. It needs a broader participation from both the government, civil society. It needs a broader participation in order for it to be effective and then cover all the people. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not like it's an attack on them or inefficiency on their side, but we are just talking about what we see, what we experience on a daily basis about this. And it must change. I am aware that there are a lot of improvement that needs to be there. There are a lot of other improvements that they are working on, which we appreciate. I think I will close it there.
Indeed, Honorable, we are witnesses to some of the good things that he's doing in Pudihadi. I recently saw a video where one of the community members was talking about a project where they are making products like soaps and detergents. So one could say that there's so many things that they're doing and much responsibility that they have taken. And of course, there's still much to be done on the ground.
Yes.
I would like to give the stage to another presenter, Advocate Mosaliti.
Oh, Dadebili, thank you so much. I think Honorable Makhalanyani has adequately or elegantly addressed what I wanted to say. Without necessarily making dialogue, I was just going to say, particularly directed to Ntate Mokoni, We are not fighting. This is not to air anyone's dirty laundry. We were just relaying information as we received on the ground, relaying community perspectives. And yes, we weren't necessarily invoking any sort of attacks on anyone. Thank you.
Advocate, thank you. Dr. Nto, anything from you?
And Canada just believe most of the gender-specific questions were answered in other presentations, but I wanted to talk the issue from issue that of leaving children out of the matrix of what we are saying is social inclusion. I think her concern is genuine, especially in the context where there are so many child-headed households. It is very, very important that they should be included. But like one panelist, not panelist, but participant said, sometimes this is about the scope that you are given to cover. But I want to acknowledge that that area has a lot of child-headed households. There's an issue of teenage pregnancy. So all those issues need to be considered as we talk about the gender and social inclusion discourse. Yes, I wanted to talk to that one because I think most gender-related issues were a bit covered from other presenters that came after my presentation. Thank you.
I think I should give Besha Shali a chance to ask a question or make a contribution. His or her hand has been up for.
Hi, Tatabili. Sorry to interrupt. We may run into a clash with the time. Perhaps we could wind up because the platform is needed for another meeting. Yeah.
Advocate Lepedi, where are you with our wrap up? Ladies and gentlemen, please allow us to give Dr. Lepedi a chance to give us a wrap up. I believe you also address any other issues arising.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Billy. I think my main task is to thank you all on behalf of CNUD Legal Center and Southern Africa Litigation Center for your active engagement and valuable contributions throughout today's webinar. Indeed, your insights and experience have been instrumental in shaping a comprehensive dialogue on revisiting the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Treaty. We also want to take this a minute to apologize for any inconvenience caused by the absence of welcome remarks due to technical reasons. So this webinar, I want to assure you that it's not the last conversation on this topic. It was intended to kickstart the conversation on the review of the treaty, and it does not claim to cover everything there is to be reviewed. Further activities are envisaged by CNUD and partners to engage or to stage an all-encompassing event to deliberate on these important issues and come out with tangible deliverables geared towards the actual review. Indeed, your dedication to this cause is greatly appreciated, and together we can work towards a more just and equitable agreement for Lesotho and affected communities. Let us continue, therefore, to collaborate and advocate for necessary amendments that prioritize climate resilience, fair resource distributions, and the protection of vulnerable communities. Thank you once again for your participation and commitment. Thank you, Dr.
This brings us to the end of our brief conversation. As Advocate Lepedi has said, this is the beginning of conversations around these issues. For us, for me as a journalist, this says that we have to start igniting more conversations in our publications and write more stories around these issues, as they really are central to our development agenda as Lesotho. I thank you for your participation and your patience with me. And I thank Salk and Sinudi for the opportunity to lead this conversation. To everyone, have a lovely day. It's a pleasure to have had a chance to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ndade.
you.
Thank you. Ana ke tswela nje.